Nintendo's a very strange company. One moment they're releasing extremely safe Kirby and Yoshi sequels, and the next, Zelda's getting a Musou game. You can't predict many Japanese companies a lot of the time, but Nintendo is one that can be very difficult to predict, and nothing showed it more than when they decided to let Ubisoft make a Mario game. Not only that, it was a Mario and Rabbids crossover game. And not only that, it was a Mario and Rabbids crossover game that was also an XCOM game. Despite this being leaked for what felt like a century before its actual announcement, this was still a game that came out of left field. Seriously, no one believed it was a thing when it was announced. Like, sit and think about it. Mario crossing over with the stupid minion like Rabbids, with Grant Kirkhope composing? Well, thinking about it amounted to nothing, as the game was put in our hands shortly after, and shortly into the Switch's life cycle, with Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. Getting over the bizarre pairing, the game itself was always going to be fairly promising, seeing as it was an XCOM game masquerading as a Mario game. Now, Mario is not well known for shooting shit up with guns, he usually does that with fire flowers, so can a game like this actually work? Will Nintendo and Ubisoft actually be rewarded for being so off the wall? Or will they be smacked down hard by the slapstick glove of the man in red himself, Shigeru Miyamoto? Unlike most Mario games, there's an actual story here. The story actually starts in some random nerd's basement in the real world, where said nerd is lamenting on the fact that no one appreciates her genius. Her genius gave birth to the Super Merge, a device that looks like a PlayStation VR that can merge any two things together to create some horrible abomination. As she comments on an overheating issue, she gets up and leaves the basement, leaving the Super Merge unguarded. Now this is when some mega evil swoops in to steal the device for their own evil deeds. But this doesn't happen here. Instead, a washing machine time travels into the basement, carrying with it a load of Rabbids. Wasn't that something that's completely obvious? Said Rabbids pile out of their interdimensional vehicle and start messing about the place, finding out that this nerd was a fan of Mario, as she should be. Of course, the foolish bunny folk notice the Super Merge and decide to try the thing on. As expected, they start merging everything together, including themselves. Instead of being hideous abominations, this just changes the Rabbids' clothes, which is pretty convenient. Of course, the aforementioned overheating happens because the Rabbid gets trigger happy and ends up merging the washing machine with the Super Mario poster on the wall. It's not clear exactly how this ends up happening, but it does. The washing machine starts sucking things from the room into it, including all the Rabbids along with the Super Mario poster, and plunges the Mushroom Kingdom into chaos. The AI that inhabits the Super Merge, Beepo, gets rightfully pissed at the rabbit wearing the headset, a rabbit dubbed Spawny later in the game, as they and all the real-world debris around them plummet into the Mushroom Kingdom below. Above them, a great vortex is forming, throwing the inhabitants of the Mushroom Kingdom astray, as well as just being very menacing. Mario and Beepo conveniently meet up, as well as Rabbid Luigi and Rabbid Peach, and decide to set out to save the day. All in all, it's not much more of a story than you'd expect, and it's very much a carrot and a stick kind of story. You corner Spawny so many times, only to have something happen for him to get away, but it is still an enjoyable time. It's nice to see a different side of the Mushroom Kingdom every now and then, and Princess Peach with a shotgun is something I'll remember for the rest of my days. Now, don't go expecting anything deep, but it is an enjoyable time that will at least keep pushing you forward in order to see just what's going to torment Beepo next. So I said this was an XCOM game already, but that's really what it is. Battles take place on various battlefields littered with cover, winding pathways, rabbit pipes, and platforms of various heights. The game is turn-based in the sense that there's a player phase and an enemy phase, and you get a party of 3. During each player phase, you can move each character, use an attack with each character, and use an ability with each character. You also don't have to do things in any specific order either, you can mix and match to fit the situation. You can attack before moving, use an ability before attacking, or just move, whatever your battle calls for. Each character comes with their own abilities and weapons, of which you get a primary weapon and a sidearm, and each character has their own strengths and weaknesses. On the weapon side of things, the primary weapon is typically the long-range, point-and-shoot firearm, while your sidearm is more specialty. For example, Rabbid Luigi's sidearm is a bazooka which can travel a fair distance and hit enemies behind cover, but does less damage as a trade-off. Each sidearm fits a different situation, so it's good to keep them in mind, but I find some of them to be quite useless. Well, one of them. Mario's and Rabbid Mario's, spoiler, is a hammer and it's extremely close range. It deals a lot of damage, but it can also deal damage to cover, potentially leaving you out in the open, letting an enemy take a free crack at you. Each weapon also has a chance of applying a status effect, something that you'll be praying for in some battles, as they can easily turn the tide of the battle. Each character's weapons also tend to favor specific status effects, so you can easily build a team to fight in the manner you prefer. The only things to keep in mind about firing your weapon are that you obviously need to have a line of sight, be within range, and if you want to use a sidearm, you need to wait for the cooldown to be over, which takes a few turns depending on the weapon. Abilities also follow this rule and range from shields to damage boosts, so it's good to be using them frequently. You also need to take the mentioned cover into account when planning an attack, both for the enemy and for your party. Cover comes in two variants, full cover and half cover, both of which help out in battle. In the XCOM games, full cover will keep you safe, but half cover will keep you sort of safe depending on the stats of the enemy. Here they simplified things as full cover offers 100% protection, meaning all shots will miss you, and half cover will only offer 50% protection, with a 50% roll determining whether or not you get hit. This is a much better way of doing things and makes things nice and simple, letting your tactics show a bit more as you never have to trust your entire plan on the roll of a dice. Of course, there are sidearms that can bypass cover, and some cover can even be destroyed, making pot shots still worth it even if they don't happen to connect with your target. As mentioned before, there are status effects in the game and they can be devastating. They come in the form of honey, push, bounce, ink, burn, freeze, stone, and vampire. Honey will keep you locked in place, preventing movement. Push will do just what it says, push you or the enemy back and into things, while bounce is a similar thing, just that it can go up and over obstacles. Ink and freeze prevent actions from being performed, attacks for ink and abilities for freeze, and stone stops you from moving at all. Burn will cause you to run about randomly, and bumping into other party members or even enemies will cause them to catch on fire and can keep the chain going. As for vampire, well, it does what it says in the tin. If you are afflicted with vampire, all damage done to you will be turned into HP for the one doing the damage. This is incredibly useful and quite damaging to the side afflicted with it. Some pieces of full cover can turn to blocks that cause these status effects if shot, allowing for even more strategy in your movements, but also causing you to be wary of your surroundings. Of course, in order to actually put strategy into play, you gotta move, and you have plenty of movement options. Movement is handled effectively on a grid, with anchor points like walls and cover being where you want to stick to. Moving up to cover causes the party member to automatically stick to it, and if flanked by cover, they will stick to the correct side. If you move into an enemy, you'll perform a dash attack, letting you do damage as you move into position. Unlike something like Disgaea or Fire Emblem, there are no restrictions on how you move to a place. You can dash to someone behind you and still get the full range of your movement ahead of you, making the system incredibly flexible. Some characters, namely the Rabbid characters, can even learn how to dash into multiple enemies, really making movement a big part of combat even beyond getting to where you need to go. Speaking of getting to where you need to go, you aren't restricted to just running your ass off to get to places. No, you can also utilize the Rabbid pipes that may be scattered around the map, allowing you to travel great distances or to higher vantage points on the battlefield. Entering one of these will limit your movement, as each character not only has a movement limit, but also a pipe exit movement limit, but they are extremely useful for getting around the environment, especially to higher elevations, as if you are higher than your opponent, you'll do more damage. The last bit of combat to speak about is a team jump. If you move an ally onto another ally, you'll be able to leap off them and reach a destination you may not have been able to reach otherwise. Say you want Luigi to get his ass up to a sniper spot, seeing as Luigi is a sniper in this game, but don't see any way up. You can move him over to Rabbid Luigi and catapult off his head up to the ledge, all on Luigi's own turn. Some characters have different abilities that are triggered via this method, mostly all the Mario characters, and they are a great way of traversing the environment in a way only Mario could. There are also battles that task you with reaching the goal, or, heaven forbid, protecting Toad or Toadette traveling with you while they make their way to the goal. These can be challenging, as you know the game will try to stop you, but they do keep you on your toes and make the game not all about the murder. All this said, the combat is excellent. Now XCOM has always been great, so it is more whether they could pull off the system rather than if the system was going to be good or not. But the simplification of the hits and the Mario elements with pipes and team jumps combined with the dashes and traditional XCOM combat make for an energetic and enjoyable experience, and one that won't go down without a fight to boot. Now all that about a combat system is all well and good, but what would a combat system be without enemies to be combated? Well, I guess pretty friggin' boring. Each battle sees you square off against entrenched rabid enemies that are looking forward to putting a few holes in your plans and your party. They come in various shapes and many different sizes, and they all follow you throughout the different chapters in the game, just changing outfits as they go. Each enemy has to be approached differently. For example, one enemy type only attacks within melee range and approaches you when attacked, making a direct attack quite difficult. Another will activate an ability that gives them a free attack if you move within range of them, and so on and so forth. There's a bit of tension every time a new enemy is introduced, as you need to then learn what they can do to mess you up, because as mentioned, the game is quite difficult at times. The game not only asks you to stay alive, but also grades you on how well you do in each chapter and each world, giving you a cash and experience reward for doing well. This obviously gets increasingly difficult as you progress, and the bosses don't make it any easier. Waiting in each world, both at the halfway point and at the end point of said world, is a boss, and these offer the most challenge as tackling them is much trickier and their health pools are exceedingly high. Of course, you'll be seeing the many enemies in this game frequently, as there are only around 5 or 6 regular enemy types, but they do plenty to keep the combat engaging. Here, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality as they gel together dangerously well, making for many a hectic shootout. Now, fighting is most of what you'll do, but there is more to it than that. At least a little bit more. Each battle in each world is separated by stretches of walking, no jumping sadly, as Mario and crew, led by Beepo, traverse the world in search of Spawny. Along the way you'll collect coins, open chests, and solve puzzles. That's pretty much it, though the sense of exploration is enough for it to not get boring. The puzzles you'll solve pretty much just boil down to switch pressing, box pushing, pipe traversing, and statue carrying affairs, but they can get pretty dang tricky and usually offer a chest as a reward. Chests can contain collectibles such as music, art, or models to look at, but others contain weapons and experience orbs, both of which you'll want. Now, of course, you don't just get the weapons from these chests. No, you'll still have to buy them, and there are a lot of weapons. This is obviously where the coins come in, and these armaments cost a lot of dough, so you best get to collecting all the coins you see. Now, this is one of the big reasons you want to get as high a grade as you can in each chapter, as they give you the most bang for your buck. As for the bang for your buck, there are so many weapons that you shouldn't try to collect them all. Thankfully, it's not needed because by the time you earn enough to buy one, it'll either still be good or you'll have another powerful one unlocked. As I went, I was able to keep my team geared up, all characters even, as you'll usually have 2 weapons of equal power to choose from, the only difference being the status effect they inflict, so there is some customization to be had. As for the experience orbs, these are to unlock the skills in the skill tree, most of which are passive, but all are worth getting. These skills do anything from reducing cooldown on abilities to causing dash attacks to do more damage to your critical hits, known as golden shots, dropping more coins. There's plenty of fluff and you'll want to go for specific things first, but all are worth getting in the end. Sadly, there is no customization to be had here. The most customization to be had in the game is party and weapon composition rather than stat customization. Still, both weapons and skills show a nice progression as you go through the worlds, so they are beyond worth putting some time into. You also retain damage between fights as long as you are in the same chapter, that is, so you'll also want to be on the lookout for mushrooms as you travel, though they do tend to be rare. Picking one up heals the entire team a little, so it's good to go for them if you see them. Now, as you progress through the story, Beepo gets more skills, such as the mentioned block pushing and statue carrying. These are just used for puzzles and are mostly used in the chapter after they are discovered, but there's some things you can't solve the first time you're in each world. Completing a world also unlocks a secret chapter that consists of a couple tougher battles for more rewards. Another thing that unlocks after a world is complete are the challenges. little missions that are handed out by rabid toads, which are amusing as hell to look at, that really challenge your observation and skills. These can be obscenely difficult and award coins and experience orbs to power up your team, making them worthwhile. Overall, nothing outside the combat is revolutionary or deep, but it does work with the combat well enough to keep things engaging. I bet when this game was leaked / announced, no one would have thought the game would be a looker, but again, here we are. The game is fairly gorgeous with an appealing art direction that has a very clear merging of Rabbids and Mario. The character models themselves are pretty basic texture-wise, especially considering that Mario and Luigi's overalls are not textured, but the bouncy energy and warm lighting the world exudes is addicting. Everything just bobs along its merry way, despite the Mushroom Kingdom spiraling into chaos. The world is also full of little details, such as Rabbids getting stuck in glue, that make things feel a bit more lively, though it can feel quite artificial at times. Sadly, it's not perfect visually, as it's fairly sterile in places, with the world being empty aside from the battlefields and background Rabbids. There are no Mario staples running around, no Goombas, no Koopas, no Hammer Bros, but what is here is nice and fun looking. On the music side, this is straight up a Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack, which makes sense seeing as Grant Kirkhope is the composer. The bright and bouncy world meshes with the bright and bouncy soundtrack perfectly. They could have not picked a better composer for this game. Otherwise, there's no voice work or anything of the sort, so get used to the BWAAAAAAHs and other random garbles the Rabbids spew while Grant Kirkhope's comforting soundtrack plays over the action. Now, the game is not without its faults. Not only is the art style pretty sterile, the world design itself doesn't make a lot of sense. This is clearly a crafted world, if you get what I'm saying. This doesn't feel like the Mushroom Kingdom, it feels like a video game that happens to take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. It makes the downtime feel a little odd and devoid of energy, unlike the combat, and can drag things down, especially when re-exploring a world looking for what you missed. Other than that, you can only have 3 characters in your party, out of a total of 8, and one has to be a rabbit. You can't have a party of Mario, Luigi, and Peach, you need to have a cheap Ubisoft imitation with you at all times. This is annoying at first, but it really isn't a big deal, as they did go and make the Rabbids pretty good to make up for it. Though I do have a problem with how some characters are flat out better than others. I'm sorry Peach, as much as you are a classic video game waifu, you just aren't that good here, and I need to leave you on the bench with your rabbit self and your boyfriend's rabbit self. In the end, my team ended up being a mixture of Mario, Luigi, Rabbid Luigi, and Rabbid Yoshi. I just never found a reason to use anyone else without forcing myself to, and doing worse because of it. There are also some strange visual bugs at times, like characters leaning up against nothing when behind cover, like they were leaning against the open part and not the actual cover itself, and some fumbling around the system does as a character is trying to figure out just what side of cover they should use. There was also a bug I'm going to chalk up to a memory leak that occurred during my playthrough, as it happened when I left the game on for a long period of time in sleep mode. Eventually a cube started replacing Beepo every other step, and it caused the world to blink every time it did. It was bizarre, and I don't think I ever recorded, but it was freaky. Thankfully this went away when I restarted the application, not when I quit and reloaded, which is what makes me think it was a memory leak of some sort. Thankfully the game itself is pretty solid, though the poor balance does hurt its variety. Overall, other than random visual glitches such as the death cube of memory leak death that was destroying my world, and the general lack of customization and character balancing, Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle is a rock-solid foundation that is worth expanding on. Ubisoft built a nice, warm, and bubbly world for Mario and crew to shoot up, and Grant Kirkhope just composes musical happiness. No amount of little flaws will put a damper on this potential mistake of a crossover, and I'm fairly confident in awarding the Mushroom Kingdom a solid 8 out of 10 for their first adventure into Rabbiddom. With just some more polish, some more combat refinement, and more balancing, we'll have a goddamn masterpiece on our hands. This one is so close to it that it hurts.